Welcome back, adventurers. Have you ever built a capital city for your D&D world only for it to feel, well, kind of flat, boring, lifeless? Well, not today. Today we're going to make your capital city feel so alive, your players are going to feel like they could walk the streets themselves. So let's jump in. First of all, we need to understand how your city was started in the first place. You can't create a good capital city if you don't know its history. So think about where the city started. Is it a new city built on top of an old one? Was it once a trading post and it has now become a bustling metropolis? Is there a mine nearby that has fueled its economy? The how will always inform the rest. So once you know a little more about its history, you can start to really consider how the history has shaped it. For example, maybe there's a big discovery in the mountains, some crazy jewel or something, and people from all over the world have come to that city in search of treasure, right? And that means your city would have grown fast, probably too fast. So the streets would be narrow and crowded, buildings would start to get stacked on top of each other, and all kinds of shady characters and people move in. On top of that, maybe there's tension between old families who've been there for a while and the new money from the treasure hunters. And to give you a better example, let's look at real-world city of Barcelona. It was originally founded as a Roman colony in the 1st century BC, and Barcelona has layers upon layers of history that have shaped it into this beautiful, vibrant city that it is today. And you can see it when you look at a map of the city. The city's Gothic quarter was literally built on the foundations of ancient Roman walls, and you can still find pieces of those walls incorporated into the streets and the buildings to this day. Now, over centuries, the city expanded beyond its medieval core, but those tight, narrow streets are still there, reflecting the needs of a time when horse-drawn carts were the main form of transport. Now, as the city grew, so did its identity, obviously. In the 19th century, the city underwent this massive expansion that was designed to accommodate the booming population and also modern industries. The new districts were laid out in a sort of grid pattern with wider streets, which were a direct contrast to the chaotic winding roads of the older sections of the city. All of that isn't necessarily important, so whatever the case, what you can see is that each era left its mark on Barcelona's layout and its architecture. So that historical layering is what makes Barcelona feel alive. When you're walking through the city, you can literally see the history in the streets. That's what you want to capture in your D&D city, the idea that every generation sort of leaves something behind. So maybe your capital city has also grown beyond its original walls, just like Barcelona, with older parts of the city feeling cramped, while the newer districts feel more organized and modern. Then there's the location. Now, location, and specifically what is available as a resource, will determine what the city is built with. The geography and the natural resources surrounding your city will shape everything from the architecture to the economy. A capital built near a river might have a thriving trade with docks and warehouses along the waterfront. If it's near a forest, well, obviously there's not going to be any water. Wood might be the dominant building material, or if there's a quarry nearby, the city might be known for its impressive stone structures. The key is to make sure your city feels like it's responding to the environment around it and what's available to it. But what about the people who live there, right? The heart of any capital city is the people, its citizens. So who are they? Is the city a melting pot of different cultures, like a trade hub that draws people from across the world, or is it more isolated with a strong local identity? The characters that live in your city are going to help make it come alive. So think of a mix of NPCs from street vendors who know all the gossip, or the noble families that are pulling the strings behind the scenes. Try to just think of a broader picture of who these people are, where they came from, and how they came to be as part of the city. On Earth, you can see this when you look at landlocked areas like the Midwest. In those landlocked areas, you tend to find smaller, more tight-knit communities with a strong sense of local identity. These places can feel more isolated, and you might have traditions that are passed down through generations. But when you contrast that with major port cities like London or New York, which have long histories of being gateways to the world, they've become melting pots filled with people from all walks of life, different cultures, different languages, and different ideas all blending together. This same concept can be applied to your capital city in your D&D game. A trade hub might have bustling markets with merchants from distant lands, and they each have their own customs and their own goods, while a more isolated capital would have deeply rooted traditions with every family and faction tightly interwoven. And the amazing thing about having it be a metropolis like New York or a city like that is that you can use that as a way to not only flesh out your world and make it feel more real, but it can also be a source of storytelling because there might be conflict between different groups. So you can see how just thinking about where your people might come from can not only enhance the world, but also inform your storytelling and your campaign. Now, to add to that, you also want to have factions and guilds, because every major city has groups with their own own interests. Merchant guilds, thieves guilds, political factions, each one of them has their own goals, and your players might find themselves entangled in these power struggles, whether they mean to or not. Now, in medieval times, guilds literally controlled who was allowed to sell their goods in stores. If you were a newcomer trying to break into the market, you had to go to the guild and play by the guild's rules or risk being shut out entirely. You even had to pay at times, usually all the time. These guilds held serious power, and in your capital city, they could be doing the same. Maybe there's a merchant guild that controls the trade, demanding high fees or bribes for newcomers to sell their wares. Or perhaps the thieves guild operates in the shadows, pulling the strings behind the scenes, with even the guards turning a blind eye in exchange for a cut of the profits. And doing something like that, you can really lean into it to show how corrupt this city might be. Now, the fourth thing to think about is the conflict within your city. Every great capital has its share of problems. Maybe there's political corruption with the ruling class manipulating the laws to maintain their power. Or there's unrest in the streets with citizens protesting high taxes or a lack of resources. We all know that these things have actually happened in real life. So why wouldn't they happen in your world? There could even be deeper, darker threats like a secret cult working behind the scenes. You gotta love a good cult. Slowly, this cult might be gaining influence over key figures in the city. Conflict is what drives your players into action. It's the thing that makes us care, and it gives them reasons to get involved and pick sides and make decisions that shape the city. And after all, as Dungeon Masters, isn't that what we want? We want to build the story and build the world with our players. So let's take a look at another example. In ancient times, there were often power struggles between different factions within a city. Think like ancient Rome. The Senate, the military, the various wealthy families were all vying for control, trying to make their mark in history, and maybe set themselves up comfortably in the process. And this created constant political intrigue. Assassinations, betrayals, shifting alliances, these were all part of a daily life for lots of people throughout history. You can name lots of famous families, such as the Plantagenets, and even more recent history gives us figures like Al Capone, who practically ran Chicago during the Prohibition. Gangsters like Capone controlled entire industries through corruption, violence, and intimidation, with law enforcement often turning a blind eye or even being in on the game. And these kinds of conflicts can give your capital city the same sense of tension and danger, with rival gangs or criminal organizations pulling all those strings behind the scenes while the authorities either look the other way or struggle to maintain control, like Gotham. Now, in your D&D city, this could translate to powerful criminal syndicates running underground operations, merchant guilds bribing officials to secure monopolies, which would be crazy, or secret societies pulling the strings of political power. Your players could be caught in the middle of all of this, hired to protect a noble, or to sabotage a rival, or even bring peace. And that constant power play in the background or those backroom deals make the city feel alive, and it just adds more danger and intrigue, and your players are never quite sure who they can trust, and we just love that as DMs. And then lastly, there's your skyline. This one's big for me. I think a city's skyline is one of the most defining features of any metropolis or any city, and in your D&D city, it should be no different. What stands out to your players when they first approach the city? Are there these massive spires for mages' academies, or domed temples, or a massive fortress that looms over the streets? Maybe the skyline is dotted with smokestacks, right, from factories, because it's an industrial area, or sleek magical towers belonging to those powerful guilds. The skyline honestly can just tell a story of its own. If it's a city ruled by magic, you might have enchanted towers that are floating above the ground. And in an industrial city, the skyline might be dominated by steam-powered contraptions, or towering factories that are just belching, why did I say factories like that? Or towering factories belching smoke into the sky. A wealthy city might have opulent palaces perched on top of these hills, while the slums are spread out below in tangled streets. It's all about setting that tone and giving your players sort of visual cues for the kind of place that they're stepping into. But the skyline also gives your players a sense of direction and scale. Maybe they can see the city's central palace from anywhere, or perhaps there's a towering structure that acts as a landmark for them, that guides them as they navigate the bustling streets. So you can see how the skyline sort of adds a whole new layer to the immersion, because even where you live, you might be able to think of some identifying features in your own skyline, even if it's a small town. Now, as a rule of thumb, for all major cities, I try to come up with at least one thing that makes them stand out for a couple of reasons. And one is that it just makes sense that a city would have something like a cathedral, or a temple, or a university, or a floating palace, or whatever, but it also just helps give your players something to latch onto when painting the picture of what that city is in their minds. It's just one more thing to make it memorable. So there you have it. Those are 5 things that I like to think about when designing my capital cities. Obviously, there's a lot more to think about when it comes to the internal workings, but when it comes to pure design, those are the things that I like to focus on. Now, let me know in the comments down below what you do to help design your city's aesthetic look. Now, I wanted to give you all an update on my buddy Tobias. You all came together and followed those tracks, and they led to, well, this weird portal. Now, as some of you might know, I'm stuck here in my realm, but you're not. I need you to go in after him, and it might be dangerous. So first things first, I need you to make an Arcana roll because that portal seems a bit unstable. So go down to the comments, grab a d20, and let me know what you got. Don't lie, the dice gods are watching. Thank you so much for watching. Forge on, my friends, and I'll see you next time, adventurers.